As I'm sure many of you guys are aware, League is a game very much predicated on meta and statistics. Across the internet, there are dozens upon dozens of analytical sites aggregating data on the however many millions of games that are played throughout the world every week. With that data, they then compile the statistics of what champions are proven to win more games than they lose, thereby allowing players to figure out what champions are the most effective. It stands to reason that following the meta would see you winning more games on average, and while that is true on paper, occasionally you'll stumble across a pick, build a strategy that breaks the mold, and garners unusual amounts of success, sometimes eventually becoming meta in and of itself with enough word of mouth. There have been so many off-meta strategies over the years that have either become meta or forced Riot to take action to mitigate if not outright prevent the strategy from being played altogether, namely in the interest of preserving the game's overall competitive health. For today, I wanted to look through some of the most infamous off-meta builds, breaking down how they worked, why they were so dominant, and why they don't really exist anymore. One of the highest profile cases in League's history dates all the way back to the olden days, and it concerns one of the most iconic yet worst designed champions in the game, Tryndamere. Nowadays, Tryndamere is characterized as a crit-based auto-attacker who presses ultimate and runs at you until eventually you die or he does. An extremely one-dimensional playstyle that beggars belief how he could possibly find an off-meta build. Well, if you go all the way back to the old days of League, AP Tryndamere was a freak of nature. Even though he did mainly physical damage and most if not all of his stuff was contingent on basic attacking, Tryndamere, like most other champions back in the day, for some nonsensical reason has AP ratios on a couple of his attacks. At max Fury, Tryndamere's Q heals for 300 base plus 150 ability power, quite an exorbitant amount, wouldn't you say? Meanwhile, his Z has an 80% AP ratio. So yes, in the present day his AP ratios are quite high. In that case, why did I mention the old days? Well, a couple things were different back then. Or should I say a lot of things are different back then across the game as a whole, but for Tryndamere himself, Spinning Slash used to have a 100% AP ratio and did magic damage, resulting in his Z doing almost 1000 damage in the late game. High ratios like these, especially weaponizable ratios, were exceedingly rare back in the day. Remember, we're talking about old League, back when the game was more stat-checky, less refined and optimized, etc. The 1-to-1 ratio in his Z was big, but his Q was the actual problem, as it had a 150% AP ratio. But wait, you might ask, he has a 150% AP ratio now. They're the same, right? No. The AP scaling on Tryndamere today is proportional to the amount of Fury consumed. Prior to version 3.3, however, the 150 AP ratio was a flat, unconditional amount, irrespective of how much Fury consumed. This meant that even at 0 Fury, Tryndamere would be able to heal for 1.5 times his ability power. That small distinction turned a 150% AP ratio from a fair mechanic, albeit very strange to have on it, into bar none the strongest healing ability in the game ever. The whole premise of Tryndamere's Q is that for him to actually heal a meaningful amount, he would need to generate Fury beforehand, in turn exposing himself to taking damage from the enemy laner, right? But with the AP ratio being a flat 150% back then, Tryndamere could heal for hundreds without so much as being near you. You essentially had a guy whose Z did 700 plus damage to you with every cast, and he would typically run Lich Bane, so his autos would do 500 plus after every E. Meanwhile, the guy was healing back to full HP every 7 seconds. The only way to stop him was to burst him 100 to 0. If you listed even 1 HP, he would regen back to full faster than home guards.
Aren't we forgetting one teensy-weensy but ever so crucial little tiny detail?
Tryndamere is the one champion in League of Legends, at least back in the day, that can't get one-shotted. That is literally the point of his ultimate. You can't kill him. You had a guy who made Dr. Mundo's entire existence feel pointless, and he was impossible to burst. AP Tryndamere was so egregiously overpowered purely from that one detail. Also, one more thing, Battle Fury used to be crit chance based on his missing health, not his Fury, so even at 0 Fury he would get tons of crit chance. Moreover, Spinning Slash's cooldown used to be a flat 9 seconds, and the 2-second cooldown refund on crit strikes was on anything, not just champions. Put 40% cooldown reduction on the guy and he had ultra rapid fire spamming on his E. Tons of mobility back when mobility was nowhere near as abundant as it is now. Tons of healing back when damage wasn't all that high. Tons of CDR back when spamming abilities wasn't really a thing, and it was all on a champion who could cheat death. So even though both his Q and E have very similar AP ratios today as they did back then, a couple oversights allowed for AP Tryndamere to be one of the stupidest off-meta strategies in the game. In fact, it was so broken, playing regular Tryndamere was objectively inferior in every which way possible. Now, when you guys think about Master Yi, most do not picture Gold Funnel Yi as the most notorious case of him playing off-meta. You'd point to AP Master Yi, right? While that certainly carried the same implications that AP Tryndamere did, if not more, for the sake of variety, we'll talk about a different off-meta play. I can talk about AP Mastery in a different episode. For those unaware, gold funneling is the practice of, as the name implies, funneling copious amounts of gold into a champion to where their natural gold progression is significantly inflated. While this isn't endemic to just Yi, he definitely abused it the hardest, what with the status as a 1v9 reset hypercarry. It came in different forms, but the most public iteration is Master Yi and Taric mid. The strategy was pretty straightforward. As a support champion, Taric's abilities offered considerable intrinsic value without much need for gold. Master Yi would obviously queue jungle, and since mid lane was the most locationally convenient spot to execute the strategy, the Taric player would queue mid. Throughout the game, the Yi player would farm both jungle camps and mid lane CS, letting him acquire gold at a pace far exceeding normal rates. Unless they were shut down early, he could easily be a full item ahead of everyone else on the team as early as 20 minutes, and he could reach full build while everyone was only at 4 items if not less. All the while, the Taric player would constantly orbit the Yi as if the former was Yuumi. Technically, you could use any support you wanted for this as it wasn't restricted to just Taric. But the reason Taric was the best choice was due to the specific interactions he had with the person he's supporting. As you know, Bastion would echo all of Taric's abilities onto his partner even from a distance, essentially giving them his abilities. This meant that Taric provided Master Yi with a stun, and with the way Dazzle worked, if Master Yi queued onto a target and Dazzle went off during the on-target ability period, it would guarantee the stun since Yi would basically be on top of his opponent. Against a DPS-heavy champion like Yi, a 1.5 second stun spells certain death. Meanwhile, if you tried to attack him first, Taric's bonus armor provided by his W plus a sustain from Q, the invincibility from his ultimate, and Yi's own inherent damage mitigation through meditate made one-shotting him functionally impossible. Altogether, you had a 1v9 hypercarry who, even without kills, would be so far ahead in golden experience over the enemy team and supplemented with virtually a point-and-click stun, bonus armor, healing, and straight-up invulnerability. The only time you could shut down Gold Funnel Master Yi was basically within the first 10 minutes of the game. If your team didn't punish the fact that they essentially had no mid laner, and quickly, the game became practically unwinnable. Taric and Yi would literally be able to 2v5. Even if you could somehow stop them, you would exhaust all your resources doing so, and need I remind you, there's still the enemy top ADC and support to worry about. That's another thing, breaking through a heavily golden level inflated Yi in and of itself can be a challenge, let alone the extra support utility offered by Taric. If by some god-given stroke of luck you were able to handle all of that, your team still had to account for the fact that Taric is the mid laner, not the support. There was the actual support champion who could also lend more utility to this strategy, at which point under no circumstances were you gonna be able to shut him down, I don't care who you are. Like all 1v9 hypercarries, Master Yi is the ticking time bomb. If you take too long to end the game, he will outscale and blast through your whole team. The gold funneling strategy removed the if in that previous sentence by effectively cutting the timer in half, making his 1v9 power spike happen not in 30 minutes, but in 15. It was a high-risk, high-reward strategy that left the enemy team with very little margin for error in responding against it. Theoretically, gold funneling is still possible in the present day, but stuff like role quests and the fact that junglers get significantly less golden experience from lane minions gives the enemy team more time and legroom to shut them down. At full power though, gold funneling was damn near unbeatable unless you were extremely coordinated with your team, something that you had no control over in solo queue obviously. Okay, you might have noticed a similarity between AP Tryndamere and Gold Funnel Yi. Both strategies took advantage of oversights within their respective kits and time periods to engineer circumstances that resulted in a guaranteed game over situation for the enemy team, no matter what they tried to do. Our last off-meta strategy for today follows a similar protocol where you're forced into a damned if you do, damned if you don't position. That strategy is Inting's Scion. Just like the previous two, Inting's Scion became notorious yet successful by exploiting the fact that you had to kill Scion twice. Prior to the rise of our Lord and Savior boss, Glory in Death was seen by many as a fun yet impractical passive. After dying, Scion would turn into a zombie and lose health very quickly, but he would be able to still auto-attack enemies during that time, essentially behaving as an if I'm going down you're coming with me type thing. In application, Glory in Death wasn't very good at doing that since you could easily run away from him during the delay between him dying and respawning, and with only a small movement speed boost, he was pretty easy to kite. Inting Scion weaponized his death passive to go from the least relevant part of his kit to the most important part by changing the focus of said passive from enemy champions to towers, which obviously don't move. How it worked is that in lieu of conventional tank, the Scion player would instead rush Hullbreaker, Titanic Hydra, and tons of HP and AD items. Back when Hullbreaker was the single most overtuned item in the game, Scion would be able to deal significant damage to turrets by way of his unique synergy with the rune Demolish, which dealt bonus damage to towers based on the target's bonus health, as a way for tanks to break down turrets when given the opportunity. Sion's W gave him tons of free bonus health, naturally resulting in high demolish damage, easily over 1000 in the mid to late game. Couple that with the bonus damage on Hullbreaker and the rapid attack speed he would gain while dead, and Scion would be able to break down towers at an alarming pace while alive and even faster while dead. Glory in Death assured that even if you kill Scion, he would still be able to get demolished and if you auto-sort the damage onto a tower, meaning no matter how many times you killed him, he would eventually make it all the way to your base. Not just his auto attacks either, Sion's ultimate also did damage to towers. Several thousands were at that full power, making him one of the best split pushers in the entire game. The strategy was called Inting Scion as a reference to the Scion player deliberately killing themselves to abuse Glory in Death's insane tower taking potential. Any bonus golden experience afforded to the enemy team from Scion dying over and over again would ultimately be inconsequential for 3 reasons. Number 1, Scion didn't give a shit about fighting enemy champions, he only cared about pushing towers. The enemy team could be 50,000 gold ahead for all the difference it made, Scion would still push down turrets. This also meant that the enemy top laner would never be able to truly make use of their gold advantage on account of never being allowed to leave lane. Even if the Scion was 0-20, you still had to match him in side lane or risk losing your entire base. Ordinarily, when fighting other split pushers, if they're behind you can kill them before they can get to your tower. But the presence of Glory in Death meant even if the Scion died, he would still be able to get to your tower, so by constantly forcing the enemy team into an uncomfortable game state, even if they were ahead from Scion repeatedly inting, they were never in a position to actually exercise that lead. Number 2, the way kill golden bounties worked prior to inting Scion actually punished you for killing him over and over again. When you kill the same champion multiple times over, in order to mitigate the impact of your team's weakest link, successive kills afford you less golden experience, to where eventually you'd only get like 100 gold and maybe a cannon minion's worth of EXP or something like that. At the same time, champions would accumulate a bounty up to 1000 gold with enough kills. In theory, that should balance out, but inting Scion drastically reduces the payoff in scoring kills, making him less valuable to kill while still making you more valuable to shut down. If Scion or someone else on his team manages to score that bounty, you'd be worse off than if you didn't kill him, especially when accounting for number 3. Number 3, despite the constant feeding putting Scion behind, statistically he wouldn't actually be that much weaker than you because good inting Scions would have well over 10 CS a minute, stay relatively close in levels because of that still good CSing. They would also have a lot of gold through taking towers, and secondarily, the free health stacking from his W plus the sheer stats offered by Hullbreaker would enable Scion to still put up a decent fight even though he's down 10 kills. And if he somehow got a shutdown on you, that one kill would screw you over by essentially giving back Scion all the gold you lost. This strategy took advantage of the fact that Scion was the one champion in the game who could still press their towers and eventually the Nexus even after dying, finding loopholes in multiple game systems to make it genuinely profitable for your team if you ran it down constantly bashing your face into towers. Scion would eventually scale to have tons of HP and tons of damage, meanwhile the enemy team would slowly but surely run out of towers protecting their base. A funny catch-22 he would put you in is that his ultimate would do massive damage to towers, right? Sometimes enough to one-shot them altogether late game. You obviously didn't want him crashing into your Nexus turrets and taking both of them out in one go, making your only option to face tank his ultimate. Problem is, when Scion has 300 bonus AD, his ultimate can literally do like 2000 damage, and unless the team had a tank, no one would willingly want to face tank a full power Scion ultimate. You would straight up die. Still though, at the same time, you can't just let him rampage all over your turrets. You were damned if you did, damned if you didn't. Shutting down inting Scion was of paramount importance not only because the strategy was hilariously effective in the most degenerative way possible, but it also posed an extreme danger to the game's overall competitive integrity. The strategy literally involved intentionally dying. Good inting Scion players like Baus made the strat look overpowered, but that's only because Baus has an incredibly keen intuitive understanding of the game and he knows how to mitigate the downside. For every one successful inting Scion player, there could be hundreds, if not thousands of inting Scion players who actually int and lose their team the game by taking stupid pointless deaths instead of calculated ones. The amount of infrastructural changes they made to League to stop inting Scion was crazy. Baus may have single-handedly forced Riot to change half a dozen game-wide mechanics purely because of inting Scion. Most people think of the super old days of League when asked about toxic off-meta picks because the game was a lot more unrefined back then. But there are quite a few extremely degen off-meta plays in the modern day as well, otherwise Happy Chime Noise's channel would never have existed. There are just far too many for me to talk about. I could easily make a part 2, 3, 4, etc. So if you guys want me to talk about any other crazy off-meta strats that actually worked, let me know in the comments down below which ones you think are worth covering next, and I'll get to work on the second episode right away. For the time being though, if you enjoyed the video, I would appreciate it if you'd like to like and subscribe. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter at Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other League discussion content if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.